ninth episode of the Pepper Podcast. For those that are returning, welcome back. And if you are new, the Pepper Podcast covers a wide range of spicy events that occur in our daily lives. Two high school students tackle heated topics through discussion. I am your host, Jay Mehta, and joining me is my co-host, Andy Watson. And today's topic will be regarding the American education system and how students' stress levels and their mental states have declined over the years of schooling. According to a Pew Research Center analysis of data from the 2017 National Survey on Drug Use and Health in 2017, 13% of U.S. teens aged 12 to 17, which is around 3.2 million, said they had experienced at least one major depressive episode in the past year, up from 8% or 2 million in 2007.
Yeah, so I think this topic has been one that has been hot on our list for quite a while because, we're both students and kind of experienced this firsthand,
Hmm.
especially especially with our, future ambitions and kind of all the years of schooling we have in the future. But yeah, I can definitely relate to this topic a lot because I know that like in middle school, I didn't really care that much about school, to be honest. But
Hmm.
then I got towards like eighth grade, and then like the end of eighth grade, and then like high school, and I was like, oh shoot, this stuff actually counts.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was always told like you need to keep your grades up. You need to not by my parents, but like yes by my parents, but they didn't like force me to do well. They just did try your best, and that's something that I really admire. About what they do is they,
Hmm.
they just say like try your best, and
Yeah.
so I know that moving into high school, especially, I kind of saw the shift in students, like noticing kind of like little things that go on in the schooling environment, especially when it comes to grades, GPA, test scores, homework, stuff like that, and how even my mental health kind of took a hit, especially during COVID. But that's kind
Yeah.
of a universal experience. But regarding school, especially, my mental health kind of went down, and it's right now my mental health is a lot better, but it's still not great because I always find myself kind of thinking about like my future in my own high school and my college career, and then if I'm not doing enough at school,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So there's always, I guess, like what we were talking about, is like self doubt. And especially like as we move throughout the years, there's gonna be like more and more just like people that are becoming less and less happy with their lives. And so we're seeing a lot of people just getting more and more depressed over the years. And so, like you said, you know, elementary, middle school, or, things are relatively easy, and they're great. But as you slowly move into high school and things like where things actually count, it's getting a lot more competitive, and it's getting, there's a whole environment that's trying to push a lot of factors onto you, and there's not a lot of leeway that's allowing you to, like venture out really in what you want to do, especially with academics. That goes with extracurriculars, is where you venture out. But academics is now forced on, at least in high school, is forced on really getting the things that you need to out of the way, but doing it in a kind of like a forceful manner, doing things that because it's required, you have to take it, which I completely understand. But things that don't really, things that you aren't passionate about. And so when people have opposing ideals to a subject that they're forced to take or something like that, they
Yeah.
tend to not like it. Not to mention that there's a lot of people that are, getting worse grades and things like, especially with COVID. So these worse grades and lower GPA has been shown to actually be correlated with a like a more depressed state. And so
Hmm.
with having a lower GPA, that may cause you to have be more depressed, which then, if you don't seek help or anything like that, you're gonna get worse test scores or stuff, and you're gonna be more depressed, and then it's a perpetual
Yeah.
cycle. Again, we mentioned
Yeah.
it 9 episodes
Mhm.
in. There's a positive feedback loop, right? You're just gonna keep going, and you're gonna keep going, and you're gonna get more depressed and more depressed and more depressed, which is why I say, if you are depressed, try to seek some form of help. That's very important, because you don't want to just continue the cycle where you fall into this big rabbit hole where you're not able to escape. And that's something that's really terrifying,
Mhm. Yeah.
especially if you're caught straight into that. And generally, when you're in that, you don't know what's going on. So.
Yeah, and I think that the focus should definitely be on student mental health, especially with it given our current system of education.
Hmm.
And while yes, we do have guidance counselors, but personally, like my guidance counselors, all like they're not great at handling, mental health. What they're great at doing is college prep,
Hmm.
and I respect them for that because that's in their job description. But I'd like to see a bigger emphasis on mental health. And in my school, actually, there's been a new club or an initiative that was passed to increase awareness on mental health, and I really thought that that was a great idea. And I think more schools should implement this. But you were talking about like courses that and like subjects that people kind of didn't want to do but were kind of forced to take,
Hmm.
and I go to a school that you need a math credit, you need like or like a state that has those requirements.
Yeah.
And like what I always find myself kind of frustrated with by how kind of society, especially in this country, has kind of set up education is like you either are on a course on STEM or the humanities.
Yeah.
And like when we're talking about passions, yes, I have many passions that span vastly different areas of interest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
For sure.
it's not just STEM and it's not just like art or opera or stuff like that. Like I personally find chemistry to be really interesting, but may find, you know, geometry to be not as interesting. And like going to my school, I kind of was forced in this box of you have to do math and science. And once you
Continuously.
start that path,
Not to mention
yeah,
continuously.
continuously, yeah, you don't have much options to explore your interests outside of that.
I
And I
agree.
really kind of want to do that because I am also interested in, operas and plays and literature and art and stuff like that, geology, stuff like things that kind of don't necessarily fall between science,
Hmm.
technology, engineering, math, stuff like that. And I think that's kind of a detriment towards people because I believe in fostering people and students to be better people holistically.
Hmm.
And that includes, the mind, the body, the spirit. And how are you going to explore that if you can't have a good mindset? Because school fosters um, such kind of a system that kind of puts down your mental health and
Mentally
then kind of
debilitating is
limits
what I like to call it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, mentally debilitating and kind of like cuts off your options
Hmm.
to explore other things that might help you mentally and might help you spiritually, stuff like that. And that's just kind of frustrating.
And so yeah, I definitely understand. And I completely agree with you. Nick. I actually made this point as well. Um, I understand that there are required classes that we have to take, but
Mhm. Yeah,
continuously, forcing somebody to take a class that they maybe would not like without giving them a whole lot of branch out, is not providing enough leeway, and it's not really. It's keeping you um constricted to only one area. My school, I don't know about your school, but they have something called elective focuses, so they make us take three classes in our elective focus, which is good. So if because I'm in health science, I take three health science classes over my 4 years, and I'm able to explore my interest a bit, which is definitely very helpful. But I feel like we could maybe explore into that further, especially for counties in our state that don't have that kind of access to education like that, especially with the lack of teachers and COVID crisis and things like that. Um,
yeah,
but exploring interest is something that's so important, and I'm glad that you mentioned up the idea of we only have really two paths in life, which is STEM or humanities. The
yeah.
job field is so vast and so exponential that you
Diverse.
can really, yeah, diverse, that you can really do anything you want, as long as
Yeah.
it's reasonable. And even if it's not reasonable, generally, there's a lot of jobs that rely on risk. So
Hmm.
do whatever is in whatever's in your interest, and
Yeah.
what like I've heard my dad said, like, do whatever you want, and the money will come. So as long as you do what you enjoy, and I guess this is like a saying that a lot of people say, but oftentimes it doesn't really work out, um, per se, because I guess we've created an idea, especially in the United States, where again, like you said, these two paths are the only paths that we can take. And so you're constricted, and you're constricted to this one area. And even if your passion is in one area, like let's say hypothetically we like, you know, operas, like you said, but I'm constricted to chemistry, right? I'm not able to really explore what I love and enjoy as much
Mhm.
anymore. And so if you don't diversify what you do, it's very difficult for you to enjoy it. Because if you're focusing all your time and energy on one subject, that subject quickly becomes boring. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe not for you, but definitely for me. So I try to diversify what I'm doing, but if I can't
Mhm.
diversify what I'm doing, especially with the constraint things like that, I'm not going to be able to enjoy what I'm doing, and I might become slowly depressed and things like that, where I won't be able to really feel a certain way where I used to. And then it's even worse where it's like I can I'm like an arm's reach away from what I want to do, but I'm not able to do it for maybe financial reasons or educational reasons or things like that. And
Yeah.
something that's also interesting is like we've also uh created like a stigma around you pretty much have to go to college. I mean, I'm most likely most likely going to uh a college, for an institution
Yeah.
or like gonna further my education, but it's not always for everybody, right? School's not for everybody. Either people go to trade school or people go they go out and they
Exactly.
drop
Kind
out
of
and they do
start
what they
their own
want.
business, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not for everybody, but we've created a stigma around it that we pretty much have to. And so some people are spending a lot of money and maybe not making use out of their degrees to their that full extent. And so they're not able to financially support themselves enough, which again causes um, lifelong symptoms of depression and things like that. And finance plays a really big aspect into depression, which is really sad. I mean, I can pull up some statistics about finances and poverty rates and things like that, but we can move this back to school, right? So other
Mhm.
countries, and again, you have to take this with a grain of salt because of its size as a country.
Yeah.
But Finland, which is considered one of the happiest places to live, has a very I wouldn't say progressive, but a very laid hands laid off, hands back, laid back
Mhm.
experience,
Mhm.
where they kind of let their students explore what they enjoy, and really understand their passions at a young age. And so
Yeah.
apparently the majority of the students in primary and secondary education in Finland were satisfied with their life in general and like to go to school. So while 85% of the fourth and fifth graders expressed satisfaction with their life, the corresponding figure among older students was around 69.5%. That's still miles ahead of the United States, which
Yeah.
is crazy, which we've had an epidemic of younger students and younger and younger and younger students getting more depressed. And so like as a chart here shows that 50 plus year olds are typically have the lowest depressed rates. And then above that is 26 to 49, and significantly above that right now is 18 to 25, and now what's at the top is 12 to 17-year olds. And pretty much the 12 to 25-year olds have really climbed the charts, and we have been at the top um, pretty recently. And so things aren't really going down, especially with COVID forcing you to stay indoors, and it has again constricted you even more. And so this exponential, again, like we said, the cycle of depression just really increases.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you bring up Finland because yeah, it's been proven that their education system is one of the best in the world, and I don't think it's something that should be neglected. And I think that if the US were to implement something kind of like that, or to instill their values on not just standardized testing and assessing student academic achievement through that pathway, and instead kind of focusing on the student as a whole and letting them learn their interests and what they want to do and what they're naturally good at, and kind of using, like different ways to um, assess academic prosperity, kind of how like Finland does,
Mm-hmm.
because most of their teachers graduated and have degrees, and, like went to school and kind of like understand what it takes to be a good teacher. Because I
Yeah.
think that one of the problems in the U.S. is a lack of good teachers. But I personally cannot blame the teachers for not, trying their hardest every day because of the fact that they get paid so little, and like it's such an unappealing job right now because like I know that in the last month or two, because like I'm a junior,
Hmm.
and so people are like, "Oh, what do you want to do? What do you want to do in the future?" And so I know some of my friends wanted to be teachers, and some of my teachers who asked that question try to discourage those students from being teachers
Yeah,
because of the amount of stress, the work, and the little pay that they get. It's so discouraging
yeah,
to hear like imagine you want to be a teacher, you want to like, but then in Finland, teachers are kind of they're actually very respected and get paid fairly well compared to the US where teachers are paid very little. And I've
yeah,
heard this time and time again of how teachers always talk about how little they get paid, and it kind of like hurts to hear because like teachers have one of the most important jobs in the world,
yeah.
like educating the younger generation and defining who they are, what they want to be, and to being like kind of like a second home for these kids.
Hmm.
And it really sucks because after COVID especially, the demand for teachers has increased, whereas the actual amount of teachers and like people going to the teaching profession has decreased.
Yeah, and people have aren't filling those jobs either. So we're just in a deficit.
Exactly.
But I found some data. So the overall 4-year public student satisfaction rate in the United States was 53%, um, compared to Finland's 69.5%. And so there is a definite difference. And again, that goes to show about the finances that teachers are given. Our teacher salaries. It's all
Hmm.
public information, by the way. You can go and search up with a little bit
Yeah.
of info like how much your teacher makes, and it's really depressing to see, really
Yeah.
depressing to see. Um,
Yeah.
and it's not really enough to it's barely enough to really live, and
It
it's
really,
but it's
yeah.
definitely not enough to live comfortably, and I feel like that's something that is really sad to hear because teachers, again, like you said, are pretty much one of the most important people in our society as they teach the younger generation, which will feed the nation in 20, 30 years. And without
Hmm.
teachers, our society would be in chaos. So,
Exactly.
but paying them to but not paying them to a high standard, or paying
Hmm.
them for their job, paying them for really, I hate to say this, but what they're worth, um, is something that we're not doing, especially because we are sacrificing teacher salaries for more, for other things, especially
Hmm.
like like we're taking a lot of that money and we're putting it into things like the prison system, and we're putting things into infrastructure is great, but we're putting a lot of money into
Yeah.
infrastructure and things like that, where money can go to schools, right? Because I feel like putting more money and investing money into education will yield you a lot better return on interest, financially speaking,
Yeah.
than
Exactly.
not, right? So there's been data showing that investing more money into education and educating your people, like the students of your area, would, I don't know, after it'd be a long term investment, of course, after 20,
Yes.
30
Yeah.
years, there would be more revenue gained, um, for the area, which shows that if you're more educated, you're more likely to get a better job, which gets a better pay, you know. So that's really
Hmm.
important. That shows, you know, how our society is supposed to be run.
Yeah, and I think that instant gratification is something that is kind of is associated with the American culture and society.
Hmm.
Whether it comes to food, whether it comes to social media and like on a video game presence, stuff like that. Especially in school, when it comes to investing, like you said, investing in education is a long term it's a long term investment, but overall will increase the GDP of a country as well as kind of stabilize our economy and like kind of see that growth over and like human development index will go up. Everything will pretty much increase because education is one of, if not the most powerful tool that a country has to its disposal. Because an educated population kind of like they kind of run themselves,
Yeah,
and they run themselves and not really like not necessarily saying like, oh, we don't need the government, but like they're more educated, they can make decisions that will kind of benefit their country as they see fit. And we're talking about this like cycle of the US government not putting money into education. Education is one of the least percentages that the U.S. puts its that it puts its taxes towards, which the most is being like the military and Medicare and Medicaid stuff like that,
Hmm.
and they're taking a lot of that money, which like that is important, yes. But what I think is also important that should not be seeing any cuts is education, and the education has gotten a lot of cuts recently, and
Yeah.
I've seen that firsthand because I used to go to a school that or like governor's school, for example. I have a close friend who went to a governor's school in Tennessee that
For those
recently
that don't
got
know what
cut
governor schools
funding.
are, for those that don't know who governor schools are, it's
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
like where in the summer, high school students go to a college where they get to take maybe college courses and enrich themselves for like a couple
yeah,
weeks.
for like
But
credit, yeah. And so the governor pretty much pays for your tuition if you get accepted for whatever scholarship. But my friend, he only got like 2 or 3 weeks because they've been cutting funding so much that it kind of cut into that. So they had to take it. So they decided to take it out of education. And I think that instant gratification aspect comes into that into play here, where we're too uh, skeptical of investing long term into something like um, education, and it kind of it like I understand why they're cutting it
hmm,
because infrastructure is important, the military is important, especially currently, but I don't think that's the wisest decision
yeah, I think
in my opinion.
I guess what you're trying to say is we're investing more in short term gains rather than long
Yeah,
term gains.
yeah.
Again, like you said, we understand. Um, but yeah, we're definitely. I mean, the state of Tennessee uses something called the BEP formula, which is how
Hmm.
they determine how much like a district or county gets. And
Yeah.
so it's based off of a lot of minimum values that really are not representative of the amount of revenue and profit that the state of Tennessee receives. And so I believe last year the state of Tennessee has a got like a $4 billion, or sorry, maybe $2 billion surplus, while
Hmm.
we
2 billion.
also 2 billion. You're right. While we cut money from education in some areas, which is definitely we of course added to some, but again, long term investments I feel like are a lot more important,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to education. But we aren't pushing, we aren't advocating for money to go in that area, and we aren't putting our money and allocating it there. So I feel like that's
Yeah.
definitely something that's affecting us as, like you said, we're having less job thing, like less teachers are, you know, applying, and teachers are becoming more depressed with the amount of workload, and
Mhm.
of course they're not getting paid. And so if I believe that, if you see a depressed teacher, especially like because some people think that teachers are their role models, and so
Yeah.
if you see a depressed role model or your depressed teacher, it kind of resonates with you in a definitely a sad way, because like if
Yeah.
somebody that's supposed to really teach you and educate you about the world does not look happy, that shows that like there are a lot more issues to our
Hmm.
society that's going on rather than just what's going on in the
Yeah.
classroom. But I think if you want to, we can pan over a little bit back to what you said. You said standardized testing a while back.
Hmm.
And I have to admit, I am pretty guilty about standardized testing. That we took a standardized test, and I've been
Yeah.
obsessing over it. So there's like one, and I've been like, Andy, I'm waiting for scores to come out. I'm waiting for scores to
I
come out,
know.
and
Yeah.
I feel like that's so important that we talk about that.
Hmm.
The stigma around standardized testing is so crazy, specific, and just like me, like I'm like going crazy over just getting a number, and that
Hmm.
number determines like how much money I'm going to get at schools and things like that. And I'm thinking so
Yeah.
much into it that like if I don't get, or and people, of course there's so many people that take the ACT and SAT,
Hmm.
but if you don't get a desired score, you definitely get a sense of depression,
Yeah.
whether it be short term or long term, depending on how many ACTs you take. But
Yeah.
of course, they let you take as many as you want. Well, I think it's like up to 10 for the ACT. I don't know the limit on the SAT. I don't think there is one.
It's like I think it's like 12 or
Yeah,
14 for
yeah.
the ACT.
But again, that costs a lot of money, and
Mm-hmm.
like it's definitely something that can be depressing for students because
Yeah.
it's sometimes not rewarding, and that's something that can really hurt people. And so that's something that's really important though for high schoolers and entering into college, because
Yeah.
is really what determines where they go. And it's actually less of it now. Something that's good is we're putting less emphasis on ACT scores now, especially with going
Yeah.
test
Yeah.
optional, and we're focusing more on, you as a
Yes.
person. So that's definitely something that's great. But
Yeah.
again, standardized testing is still so prevalent that if you maybe don't get the desired score, or the stigma around like the craziness over getting scores and things like that, getting a number
Hmm.
pretty much is like one of my main, things right now that I'm waiting for. And that's something that I
Yeah.
hate to say, because there's so many like better things to do in life, yet I'm not doing it. I'm
Yeah.
really obsessing over one thing.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. And
letting go of like I guess your score as a, don't base your life around the score is basically what I'm trying to
hmm
say. Um
yeah.
and
Yeah.
that really should go for a lot of students in high school, because there are a lot of people probably currently that are cramming for the next ACT or the next SAT because they want to get a better
Yeah.
score, and so they're
Mm.
really sacrificing their mental health for, I know, a better score. And while that might help you short term, really long term, what is that going to do? I feel like this really
Yeah.
ties back into what's going to happen short term, what's going to happen long term. We're not really investing in ourselves long term, and we're looking at it short term, which is something that's really important to mention.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you kind of shared that personal anecdote because it shows the extent to which this problem occurs in our lives.
Yeah.
And I am also guilty of that. Not so much like recently because I've been trying to like phase myself out of that mindset. Like, I don't really care, what I get. Like, it is what it is. It's not going to determine my worth as a person. I'm still a lot more than just a number, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, especially the school I go to, that kind of like grades and ACT, that is like it's so competitive
Yeah.
amongst like my friends and peers that it's mentally exhausting.
Yeah.
And I found my friendships have like kind of, they've seen their ups and downs because of that, and like the competition because of that. I just think it's such a toxic kind of it's such a toxic system that doesn't necessarily measure your intelligence, but measures your aptitude to taking a test in a time frame, and it's such a specific test, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, GPA is a little bit more important than that. It kind of gives you more of an overall glance of how your academic career has gone and how hard you work in that case. But even then, socioeconomic impacts can and like situations can affect that. So not every student is equal, and not every student is kind of starting off at the same point.
Yeah.
And what you were saying, like I remember you being like, I stayed up till like how whatever a.m., two
Yeah.
a.m., 3 a.m.
I think I
waiting
stayed
for
till
my
12. I stayed
ACT.
until 12 waiting for it.
Yeah, waiting for your ACT, and I was like,
I
Jay,
was I was pretty ashamed. Yeah.
it's okay because like I think we all need to work on that and kind of like phase ourselves out of that mindset. Like, I can't compare myself to this other person because no matter what, right, we're different people. We have
Mhm.
different values, we have different skills and interests. And I think that I need to love myself and see my worth as a person as a whole and not kind of rely on that number. And I will admit, it is so hard to look past that number because, like, when I see my B that I got for the quarter in AP Calc or AP Chem, and I'm like, oh, I cannot move past that. But like I've been trying to, especially for spring break. I'm on spring break right now. Like, I've been trying to kind of just live life in the moment,
Yeah.
enjoy the little things, and
Relaxation is
I
important.
can't
Oh,
change that.
you're cutting out a little. Um.
Exactly, and like kind of growing as a person and finding your interests
Mhm.
and your values, seeking what you believe in, what you want to see in the world, and what you want to change, what you want to fight for. It's much more important than your ability to get a grade on a standardized test.
Yeah.
And I think that schools kind of, rely on those standardized tests a little too much,
Mhm.
and they're not really fostering intellectual curiosity and your like um, kind of like your curiosity to learn more,
Mhm.
because I find myself kind of like cramming for a test and trying to get an A on this thing. And like, yes, it's instant gratification again. Like when I get the A, I'm like, oh, yes, I feel so good. I work so hard for it. But at the end of the day, like, did I
Mhm.
really learn? Did I really learn to love what I'm learning
Yeah,
about?
yeah, I definitely agree. And I'm glad that you mentioned, like, I'm glad that you're relaxing right now during spring break. My spring break was last week.
Thank
Man's at the beach right now, but
you.
like, so relaxation, like you said, is very important. And I want to tie this back to something that you mentioned, kind of, and I inferred it from what you said. Perfectionist mindset. So perfectionist mindset is something that affects I don't know about how many people it affects, but I feel like it's a lot of people. Uh, the
Yeah,
perfectionist mindset has definitely kind of impacted me in a negative way. I don't care as
yeah,
much now, but I was really adamant about getting a good this and getting a good that, and it has to be this, and I has to be good. I have to be better. I have to be better, and I push
yeah.
myself, right. I hold myself to a really high standard, but sometimes
Me
I get
too. Yeah,
really toxic on myself. Like, I
yeah.
push myself so hard, um, that I'm people like look at me and they're like, Jay, like you need to stop. Like you
Yeah,
look horrible. I'm like, I don't, that doesn't matter right now. Like
yeah.
like my mental health is the least thing that matters right now, and that's something that
Mhm.
I'm very guilty of sometimes. I'm trying to,
Yeah.
you know, reduce that by less, and I have reduced that to a considerable amount. Um, Removing your stresses is definitely difficult, but once you do, it's really gratifying. Because you don't
Mhm.
have to deal with it anymore, and so once you don't have to deal with it anymore, life is great.
Yeah,
But there's always going to be stress in your life. It's how you manage it that matters, right? So
yeah.
trying
I agree.
to make sure that you don't let that stress kind of engulf you and become something that you are not in control of, and that how your stress controls you. That's something that you want to try to avoid. You want to like control your stress, and controlling your stress is something that is very difficult, but once you,
Mhm.
I guess, get a knack for it, and once you understand it, that's something that will help you for the rest of your life, and something that
Yeah,
will make you a happier person overall. And
yeah.
relaxation, meditation, those are like good starting places for that. But the
Mhm.
one something that really, if we're because we're tying it back to depression rates and things like that, seeking help, I think, is very very important. Especially if you are maybe thinking about, if you are depressed, or if we're going a little bit further, if you are really depressed and you're having suicidal thoughts, unfortunately, really
Yeah,
seek help.
yeah,
I feel like you need to just talk with somebody, that you talk with your friend, talk with
yeah.
anybody.
A trusted person.
Yeah. And that's something that, just talking with people and trying to talk it out is something that really helps you as a person, and really helps
I
you
agree.
hear yourself, but get a different perspective. And so reflecting is also very important. And that's why, like, me plus time equals a lot of reflection, rather than, so
Yeah,
I think back and I'm like, man, I wish I could have done this better. I wish I could have done this better. And this goes back to perfectionist mindset. It happened in the past, right? I can't change it.
yeah. Exactly.
I can only regret. So trying to
Mhm.
remove those regrets and just moving forward, I think, is very important. And standardized testing, homework, school, a lot of that feeds into it. I I am sometimes stressed about school. Like, I have some homework to do, but
Yeah,
I mean, there's not a whole lot I can do about, like, the amount of stress level I can get, but the how I manage it, and how I
exactly.
really make sure that I don't, like I said, don't let the stress engulf me. That will
Yeah,
really determine how I feel as a person maybe tomorrow.
yeah. And I really like that mindset. Like, thinking back, like, I'm always like, oh, I did so bad on the math test. But you know what? I tried my best. It is what it is. I can't change it. Why dwell on it, right? Like, it's
Hmm.
not going to change the future. I can just, like, yes, I can study harder for the next one, but like, in this moment, why dwell on it? And like, that's taken me so many years to learn,
Hmm.
because like, I learned that this year, pretty much,
I
like
still
this
don't
school
follow
year.
it sometimes, so.
Yeah, no, same, me too. Because literally, like, I was at the beach today, right?
Hmm.
And I was like, dang, I'm probably gonna get a B for the quarter grade in AP Calc, or AP Chem, right? But like, I was like, I, you know, yeah, that sucks. But I'm gonna enjoy being here with my family and spending time with the people here. And I'm at the beach, like, it's fun. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, it is what it is. I'll just, you know, try to be more attentive and work a little harder
Hmm.
to get my grade back up a little bit, and then I'll be good. You know, kind of
Yeah.
like rationalize that in my mind, and like it's helped a lot with like recently with a lot of since this year has especially been really hard for me
Hmm.
because like talking about mental health, like friend stuff, and also just like harder classes in general, and then like college, you know, college tours, and then thinking about what you want to major in, stuff like that. It's all kind of like conglomerated into this one massive headache of a year, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, it's pretty much made me. It's been an incredible opportunity to learn valuable lessons to improve myself and my mental health, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess we can also talk about right, like the Mario Brothers syndrome, and so this is something coined by Mark Rober, in the TEDx talk that I watched a long time back, where basically
Yeah,
as a kid, you know, a lot of people have played Mario Brothers. I played Mario Brothers, and I love
yeah,
the game, but. You know what happens when you die is you go oh no and then you restart the level. And so once you restart the level and you die in one specific place, you know, okay, here's what I need to not do. How do I solve this part, and you move forward and make sure, oh, I didn't, like, I messed this up. Next time when I do it, I need to avoid it and things like that. So that's
yeah,
kind of like a growth mindset thing where it's,
mhm,
you know oh, I messed this up, next time I'm going to do this better. And
yeah,
the stigma around that is where, and I guess what's kind of ironic is that I don't know if you've ever heard this, but they're like, you get no second chances. This is the only chance you have,
yeah,
and things. Our society has really pushed. You only have one chance, one deadline, one thing to do. You have to do it now, and that's it. And so, like, I personally, like today, I forgot my binder at home by accident, and I
mhm,
had to turn something in, even though I had didn't done it the day prior, but couldn't turn it in. And they said you can't turn it in, and so you can turn it in tomorrow for late points. And so I'm like, like I don't have a second chance, So even though we've paraded ourselves in having the idea of second chances, we should have a second chance, we don't actually have any in a
mhm.
society right now. And I guess as you progress through your ages, as you enter the workforce, people are more lenient and they understand. But currently it's a lot of deadline and push and push and push, and it's
Yeah,
very strict in my opinion.
yeah, I agree. And you know, like I guess you could say we live in a world that's always moving forward, but like also you need to learn. I think one of the most important things to learn that I also need to learn, and I'm trying to make myself learn, not necessarily trying to, but like I'll be okay if I let myself learn it, is failing.
Hmm.
You know, getting a B in a class or uh,
Oh no.
getting an F on a test. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'd rather learn that now, look back on it, learn, than do it in the future, like in college when I'm an adult, and have no way of looking back or no way of coping with that or dealing with that. And like kind of like my life would go downhill from there. And
Yeah.
I really don't want that. And I think that's an important thing that everybody must learn.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like failure's okay. And I
It's
think
what
it's
you
hard for me to accept
it's what
too.
you learn from it, right? It's what you learn from your
Exactly.
failures that
And like
teach you.
I always find myself like talking to my friends because um, they go through similar things that I do, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm like, okay, yes, but it's okay because this can be looked at as a learning moment,
Mhm.
and it's failing is okay, And like I say that, and I still need to work on that myself, right? Like I'm saying this, yes, but I also have to work on it too, and I'm not afraid to tell you that I still need to work on that,
Yeah.
and it's just super important.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you talk about, getting a B and things like that. Not just, we have to mention, I feel like something that's important is that everybody has different standards. So
Mhm.
you should hold yourself to a standard where, or to a or the highest standard that you can have of yourself, but not overbearing where you're causing unnecessary stress.
Yeah,
There's a time in my life that happened, well, I guess like late last year in October or so, um, like around ACT time where I was, or PSAT time, I was so stressed. And
yeah,
I mean, like I was so stressed beyond belief that I wasn't eating a lot, and I was just
yeah,
like I was really, really, really in a bad place. And during that time, I knew I was stressed, but I was like, forget it. Let's move it aside. I wasn't really thinking about it. And I look back around it, I'm like, wow, like it was pretty bad. But
Yeah.
again, hold yourself to a higher standard. But if you ever feel like you're in a bad place, just remember it it always gets better.
Hmm.
99% of the time, it will get better eventually.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just trying to see how things pan out and eventually trying to see when you get better. That's something that's really important. And
Yeah.
you know, I hope that one day, my worries aren't just because I know my worries aren't just going to be getting a good ACT score, getting good grades and things like that. It's going to be, you know, whenever I'm in the workforce, it's, meeting deadlines or whatever, depends on what I'm doing, of course, but in the medicine industry, it's if I'm
Mhm.
giving enough anesthesia to a patient and things like that, but also enjoying life. Like, am I enjoying life? Am I having a good work-life balance?
Yeah.
Am I all right? And I'm glad that as a generation we're putting more emphasis on mental health and how
I agree.
mental health has been more of an important thing, especially even now in like
Hmm.
the workforce. Mental health is more important. Some companies are offering mental health days and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's something that's really, really great that we have now, and I'm glad that we are pushing forward for better mental health. But still, like I said, remember at the start, we've had an 8% increase in teens that are depressed, um, or that has had at least one major depressive episode from
Yeah.
2007, which is really sad to hear. So
Yeah.
trying to control ourselves, um, but trying to talking with people if we aren't in the right place. That's good,
Yeah. And just always remember, failing is okay. Making mistakes is
as
okay.
long as you learn from it. As
As
long as
long
you
as you
learn
learn
from it.
from it.
Yeah,
Yes. Like, what's the point of failing if you're just gonna do it again and again and again and again, right? Like,
yeah,
learn from it.
yeah.
Take the time to reflect on what you did wrong and what can you do better in the future, right?
Yes,
It's gonna overall make you a better person.
I
And
agree.
I'd also like to say, like, explore what you're interested in.
Hmm. I feel
What
like
are your values?
so go ahead.
And sorry, and like, what are your values? And what do you want to change in this world? What do you want to see happen and to fight for it?
Yeah.
Because, like, yes, this the world right now kind of seems pretty bleak, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah,
But
especially currently.
like, fight for it. If you fight for it, it'll always work out. And I believe in you. I think Jay believes in you too.
Yeah.
We're here for you all. So yeah,
I think we should also mention, right? Um, I feel like we shifted topics just a bit over this podcast episode, but I feel like that's really great. This
yeah,
is one of the rare instances where I believe that this was this was great that we like shifted topics because this organically developed from depression into talking about fixes and remedies and things like that.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I'm glad. I hope somebody can take some use out of this and some help out of this,
yeah.
gain some information. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Yeah. And with that, our discussion comes to an end. We thank you for listening and hope you'll stay tuned for future episodes. Don't forget to follow the Pepper Podcast on Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you.